The first time I was court-ordered, the first time I went to a meeting was like 1996, 1997, and my sobriety date is 2005. Wow. You know what I mean?
Right. So it didn't happen
if you're
right
above
away.
ground and sucking air, dude, there's hope.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Maintain Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Keeney, and we've got a great show for you today on maintaining sobriety with local comedian Jay Armstrong, who's maintained sobriety for over 16 years. Hear his journey from the bottom to the top and how he maintains. Make sure you listen to the end for a clip of our next episode with local actress Misty Jump on maintaining beauty. If you'd like to see a picture of our guests or read the show notes or a transcription of today's episode, you can visit ChristopherKeeney.com and click on podcasting. Also, I want to thank everybody for listening. We've had a great response so far. Be sure to review and follow. That way you can be notified of our next episode. All right, let's get to it with Jay Armstrong on maintaining sobriety. Today, we're going to have you on to talk about sobriety.
So what's the secret, man? I don't know. You know what I mean? I just did what I was told.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the secret.
So is that... Okay, so if you can give us a little bit of background on just kind of... Okay, I had you on here. I'll tell you a little bit about why I wanted you on the show. And then we can kind of go through some things. Like, so... We've known each other for a long time, pretty much all my life that I can remember, because we were neighbors when we were kids.
Right across the street.
Yeah. Growing up in good old Independence.
Right.
The, American pie as it could be, I guess, in our kind of neck of the woods. And, I remember us playing kickball and having fun and doing things like that. And then it kind of ventured. You went one way, I went another way. And your way was more towards drugs.
Yeah, I mean, I started, smoking weed at like 12, 13. Wow. Started drinking at 12 or 13. And it became, and I didn't know this at the time, you know what I mean? But it became my way to deal with trauma. It was trauma response.
Yeah.
So, the long and the short of my childhood is that it was brutal and violent all the time. When that front door closed and no one was home, like I was a punching bag for a lot of things, disappointments, failures. Some of it was my own behavior, you know what I mean? But it was also other stuff. And it was pretty brutal, but I was always afraid. You know what I mean? Like, always afraid. And just the level of anxiety I had as a kid, the best way I can describe it is like when you're working a job that you hate and you've got like 10 minutes left of the workday and you keep looking at the clock. That's how every second of the day felt for me. Wow. And that first time that I drank, man, I didn't feel like that anymore. You know what I mean? It felt normal. I felt on the inside the way everybody looked on the outside. Like I felt okay for the first time in my life.
Like you got that release.
It didn't even feel like release, man. No. I just felt normal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I never had before. And it was like at that moment when I realized the way that I normally felt was abnormal. And, early 90s, middle of the country, mental health is not really a topic for most families.
Oh, no. And, especially right here in our neck of the woods. It's almost, even today, there's a stigma to any kind of mental health. It's like you want to keep it secret if you're even doing it or whatever. Me personally, I've been to shrinks. I call them shrinks. They're professionals. They're doctors.
And most of them don't know much better than we do. You know what I mean? Some of the stuff is obvious, and they know. But what they do know is these are the things that we can try.
Right.
So people have this idea about getting help with their mental health and they go in and the therapist or the psychiatrist or whatever it is doesn't have an answer that works right away. And they're immediately like, well, this isn't going to work. I'm never going back.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it takes some trial and error sometimes. I mean, they're just people trying to figure it out too. They just happen to know what the different options are.
Well, I remember going into my first time seeing, because at the time I had been working at Fidelity. I was just stressed to the max. I didn't want to be in the financial industry, or is what I thought at the time. But more of it was just an overstress kind of overtime, a lot of things just kind of going on. And I remember the first time going into a psychiatrist's office, they just asked me a bunch of questions. And I thought, well, what is the point of this if all I'm going to be doing is answering questions? And then it was like 3-4 times after that. It's like they're asking you questions to make you think about things that can help you or think of ways out of your situation or
a lot of the
ways to handle things.
A lot of the first couple meetings with any mental health professional was them trying to figure out if you're even telling them the truth about stuff.
Right.
But at that time, I started thinking about killing myself when I was like 7 years old. And I would have dreams about it. And suicidal ideation is something that just followed me. And, so I'm adopted, right? So my real family didn't want me. That's how I saw it. I was given to a hardline Southern Baptist family. The man that led... he would call it led our home, was a brutal dictator, and anything that didn't go his way, his way of dealing with that was to take it out on somebody else, So the church that we went to was all hellfire and brimstone and damnation, you know what I mean? So
right.
All I know is punishment and, being unwanted.
Right.
That's all I knew. But when
I
had those
showed the joys.
I didn't know there was joy in life. Sometimes when I was at home alone with the woman that raised me, she would make grilled cheese and like pigs in a blanket and stuff, man. And that was like my joy. You know what I mean? Like that was it. Like,
well, I can remember like back in the day hanging out and playing Sega, and because that was the thing is we didn't have too many video games. Like I think we eventually got an Atari at some point in time, but you had like the Sega. I mean, you had every kind of game system you wanted, all the games and everything. And it was this very like fire and ice fire and ice kind of situation. We'd be sitting there playing, you'd be getting anything you wanted. And then sometimes your dad would walk in the door and just...
Oh, when that door opened, dude, it was like spinning a slot machine. Like you never knew what was happening. A lot of that video game stuff is stuff I would borrow from friends. Like I had a Sega Master System, which not a lot of people did, so people remember that.
Yeah.
But they were cheaper because they didn't sell well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when I took those first few drinks of alcohol, I just felt okay for the first time in my entire life. None of the worries, none of the anxiety. Didn't feel like somebody was going to grab my shoulder at any moment. I was just there and I was okay and I was fine. And I made a conscious decision. I will do this every chance I get. And that's what I did, So at 12 years old at a friend's house, I had alcohol for the first time. We had a bunch of the cinnamon schnapps, like airplane bottles that he had stolen from his parents. We drank a ton of them, like an absolutely ridiculous amount for 12-year-olds, especially 12-year-olds that have never drank before.
Yeah.
And I blacked out. I passed out and I woke up covered in my own pee, right? And the one thing that I did tell myself, that only happened because you're 12 and you're drinking hard liquor, right? And there's some truth to that. There is.
Right.
But the real truth of the matter is that I'm alcoholic. And when I start pouring alcohol down my throat, I can't stop until I pass out. And the last time that I drank was on Halloween, October 31st of 2005. My sobriety date's actually November 8th because I did drugs between that day that I drank and the day that I actually got sober. And that night, I drank until I black out. And I peed myself in my sleep, just like I did when I was 12, only now I'm doing it at 25.
Right.
So my body never matured in the way that I thought it would, where I would be able to be fine. And
yeah. But at some point, I mean, if anybody drinks too much, they're going to black out.
Right. But most people know when to stop, though. And it's not about even knowing when to stop. It's a chemical reaction. The enzymes in the liver are different. Like, we know a lot more about alcoholism now than we did even when I was a kid, let alone in the 70s, 80s,
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, there's an enzyme issue. Acetaldehyde, diacetic acid, and acetone and acetate in the bloodstream. Like, that's how the body metabolizes alcohol. It hits the stomach. The brain gets signals that says, "Hey, we need these enzymes to change this alcohol into acetaldehyde, and then from acetaldehyde into diacetic acid." Well, the enzymes are off in an alcoholic, and it creates an intense, insane craving for alcohol. That's once you've put it in you, right? Yeah. So there's two parts of alcoholism. You got the phenomenon of craving, which only develops in alcoholics, right? Which is after you've taken that first drink. And then there's the mental obsession, which is what causes you to take the first drink. You know, when you would.
So when you say mental obsession, what do you mean by that?
The mental obsession is it's a compulsion. You know what I mean? It's an obsessive compulsive behavior. If you find an alcoholic or even a drug addict at, say, 9 o'clock in the morning, and you can ask them, "You going to stay sober today?" And they'll pass a lie detector test because they mean it when they say yes. But then that compulsion comes on, and people who have never experienced like a real compulsive behavior in their life, they don't get it. You know, they look at people who do that stuff, and there are other compulsive behaviors. There's people that compulsively eat toilet paper off the roll. You know what I mean? There's weird stuff. There's normal stuff. Compulsive eating. You know?
And here's the thing: is that's kind of because, you know, we grew up on the same streets. I know we had different situations and everything, but we both grew up the same time period and everything. But I feel like where you went towards drugs or alcohol for your compulsive feelings, I was handed food and sugar. And to this day, I'm still fighting that feeling of, well, today didn't go bad, or today didn't go great, so I need a donut.
Right, this is where comfort is.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I feel like you found that in different...
chemical mitigation of the trauma response is
right.
what it was. You know, and it was pretty clear early on that I had a problem with alcohol, right? Like the first time someone used the word alcoholic to me, I was 14.
Wow.
And I was like, this is crazy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not even a grown-up yet. I'm not an alcoholic.
Right.
Like, and I still had that same idea, though. Like, my body just hasn't matured to catch up with what it needs.
Yeah.
And that's how I really saw it, though, is need, not want.
Right.
And you know, once I found a way to escape that anxiety and that fear and that constant depression and suicidal ideation, like, it became, knowing that it didn't have to be there made it worse.
Right.
When it was there.
Right.
Right.
Because then you just wanted it to go away as soon as possible.
Right. And so I just getting sober wasn't an option. Right. It just wasn't. And so I tried to just smoke weed. You know what I mean? And that didn't work. And I tried various pills here and there. And some of those I liked, you know, but I still drank. Yeah. You know, I was still, you know, a lot of times at that age, I was shoplifting liquor from like CVS pharmacy and stuff like that. My parents didn't drink, you know.
Yeah.
I had a friend that his parents drank, and he would go to their liquor cabinet almost every morning before school when I went to high school. And he would fill up his thermos with like a shot or two out of each bottle, so they didn't notice a lot of it gone out of one bottle, man. And it would be like gin mixed with whiskey, mixed with vodka, mixed with rum, mixed with like Kahlua. Oh, it was so terrible.
So like the bar bucket at the end of the night.
Yeah, you could like somebody wiped the bar and then wrung the rag out into this thermos, dude. It was so gross. But we drank it almost every day at lunch.
Wow.
And, I was drunk a lot in high school. But,
really? I had some friends, and they would, you know, we'd be at the lockers or whatever, and they'd be taking nips off of something. And now, here's the thing, though. Like, living next door to you, I saw this stuff going on, because I remember the day that we kind of diverged paths. Because let's see, I'm 39 right now. How old are you?
41.
41. Okay, so 2-year difference. I think I was around 8 or 9 when this happened, but we were riding bikes together, and we went up to Kenton Elementary, and we were riding around and everything. And then all of a sudden you saw some cigarette butts on the ground, and you're like, "Oh, these still got some stuff. I'm gonna smoke these." And I'm like,
right.
In my kid brain was like, that's gross. You don't want to do that. And then that was kind of like, you were 2 years ahead of me and everything, like going to school and all of that stuff. Right. So it was just like, oh, well, that's gross. I don't want to do that. Like,
oh, dude, nicotine is still my only addiction still.
Really?
I smoked probably the very first time I ever smoked was probably around 9 or 10. So it's probably a year later or so than what you're thinking. But, I started smoking regularly at like 11 or 12. and then dipping after that. And
well, and that's the thing. That's where it got kind of...
I smoked solid for 24 years, man. And
really?
So what's crazy, this is what's crazy. So I tell this to people all the time because I do advocacy work inside of the tobacco harm reduction field. When I was like 18 and 19 years old, I'm shooting cocaine and heroin on a regular basis, which is what I was getting to. The alcoholism, the problem with alcohol, the crazy behavior that came from it. Dude, I would get naked in the middle of the street and try to fight cops. You know what I mean? I was nuts, dude, when I drank. It was bad. But I didn't know how to deal with life not doing something.
Just to thank God there wasn't like social media back then, right?
God,
you'd be in the street.
So there was some, like, MySpace had just started. Like when I got sober. Dude. Yeah. And I am so grateful.
Right.
that there's none of those like recorded thoughts or feelings from back then.
Right.
Man, I would scream crazy stuff at strangers. I mean, I was a psychopath.
And imagine putting a phone with social media access in your... I mean, that's kind of what we're going through today.
Live stream some of the stuff, but it was nuts. But, so there were times that I would just be outside and just take my clothes off and try to pee wherever I was, or take a dump wherever I was. You know what I mean? I was just...
that does sound kind of freeing.
Just insanely drunk,
right.
And so at 16, I was hanging out with some older guys. And when I say older, I mean like 20, 21 to like 25, 30 even. And they were like, man, you can't come over here and drink anymore. And I was like, oh, so I can't come over. And they were like, no, you can come over. We like hanging out with you, but you can't drink here, man. That's the deal.
Wow, so they cut you off. Even though they were still drinking, they were still...
Right, well, what they came to me with was some Dilaudid, which is a super high-powered opiate narcotic pain medication. It's a pill, but you can crush it down and shoot it like you can shoot heroin. And they were like, we've all been doing this. And so I was like, all right, cool, it's whatever. I know Officer Burke from the DARE program lied to me about every single other drug that I've been doing.
Right.
He probably lied about this too. But, so, our DARE officer from like my 5th and 6th grade, if you smoke pot, you're going to end up being a psychopath in the penitentiary. You know what I mean? Then I met people that smoked weed.
Right.
And they were all right. You know what I mean? They were still normal people.
Right.
And so they're lying about that. And, and drinking was the same way. They try to, a drug is a drug is a drug. Well, not really.
Right.
To some extent, yes. Addiction is addiction. Yes. So whether it's sugar addiction, caffeine addiction, crack cocaine addiction, the consequences of those things are vastly different.
Right.
At least the everyday consequences. Now, the long-term consequences of like real sugar addiction, like, is still death.
Right.
But nobody says, look at that piece of garbage over there. He's killing himself with cakes. What a scumbag. He's the health care that he's going to require is making everybody's insurance go up.
Right.
But especially somebody who's trying to escape trauma that doesn't know how to other than through chemical mediation of those issues.
Oh, exactly. I can remember many times where I'd eat a cheeseburger and then all of a sudden my brain is happy and everything is fine until that sugar craving wears off, and then I need another. Man. Right, but you don't see a bunch of McHeroins on the corners, like you.
But anyway, the point is that that's the thing about marijuana being a gateway drug, right? It's a gateway drug because of the way that we're taught that all drugs are equal,
right?
And then you meet some people that consume cannabis, and they're still normal people.
Right.
Right? They're not crazy, murdering psychopaths going to a penitentiary.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so once you've opened that door to knowing that you've been lied to, that's when you get to that point where you're like, well, what else are they lying about? How bad is cocaine really?
Right.
You know what I mean? How bad is Xanax really?
Right.
Well, I mean, even doctors are giving Xanax away.
Well, I mean, doctors used to give cocaine at the dentist and all of this. I mean, Coke, the original formula of Coke had, I think, 0.5% cocaine in it or something like that. I mean, cocaine made every great film in the 80s. So,
but that's always seen as like a rich and glamorous drug where heroin never was. But for some people, they viewed it that way. But Hollywood never really made it look that way.
Right.
But so, once I realized that they lied to me about drinking, they lied to me because my parents both told me, we grew up in Hardline. I grew up in Hardline Southern Baptist Church. You don't drink.
Right.
So they told me that alcohol was evil. And then when I drank alcohol and it made me feel okay for the first time, it's like these bastards want me to feel this way.
Right.
Like they want me to experience this. They're lying to me. They know that there's a way out of this.
Right.
And
did you ever associate like, well, they said that alcohol is evil, so I guess I'm evil too, so screw it?
Not so much.
No. Okay.
You know, I mean, I definitely rebelled against the church, and now I'll have, as an adult, I have probably more anger towards organized religion than I did as a kid because of what they do to people.
Yeah.
That's not to say that all religious people are bad.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not to say even that all churches are bad.
Right.
But with like what we're finding out now about like these resident schools from the Catholic Church all through, you know, the northern United States and Canada, dude, they're finding thousands of kids that they either killed or let die and didn't tell nobody about. You know, so I mean that's the way that particular organization, you know, that's their legacy. You know what I mean? Regardless of how they want to paint it. And so when I see people who subscribe to that same legacy, to that same organization, I'm like, how could you?
Right.
You know what I mean? And it hurts my heart to know that like they've been just so wrapped up in it. It's like someone's a victim of abuse. You know what I mean? And they do everything in their power to protect their abuser.
Right.
You know, because they have that weird, you know, like Stockholm syndrome type of thing.
Right. They start to identify and then they want to...
Well, they think they deserve it.
Right.
If I could only be better, this wouldn't happen. I need to make that person happy or that group happy. The point I was getting to, though, is the alcohol got crazy out of hand, crazy fast, and it stayed that way. And until I found opiate narcotics. And it took me to the same level emotionally and mentally that alcohol did, only I didn't do anything crazy. I didn't try to fight the cops. I didn't try to pee in public. I didn't try to, you know, fight my best friend. You know, I was that guy that I have never met you before. And you come to a party or a place where people are drinking, and we say party. None of them were parties. You know what I mean? If there's not a cake or some hats, it's not a party. It's a drinking session. And I've never seen you before. And then I come straight up to you and I'm like, I heard what you said about me. You know what I mean? And you have no idea because we've never met.
Right.
But I'm about to start something for no reason at all other than I'm so inebriated that I can't control myself.
So
which is not really an excuse because you can stop drinking. And I know with alcoholism, you can't just say, all right, well, I'm done, but you can go get that help. You know what I mean?
Right.
And some people are just not ready for help when the help arrives. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying that either. But what I'm saying is for me is I'm not excusing any of the crazy behavior that I did. You know, I'm still accountable for that.
Right.
You know, and I've made, you know, the amends that I can make, you know, as good as I can make them. You know what I mean? Some things can never be repaired. You know, and some things, there's situations where you're going to cause more harm by trying to go back to repair them. But at that time, that's how crazy I was. So when I started using opiate narcotics, and the first day it was Dilaudid, the second day it was heroin. And when I say heroin, I mean heroin. It was actually heroin back then. It wasn't fentanyl. It wasn't carfentanil. That's what's killing people today. And I say this and it sounds terrible to people that don't understand like the severity of the situation that we're in. But the problem with heroin right now is that it's not heroin. It's fentanyl. And it's killing people left and right. But people, we went through this weird phase where nobody cared when junkies died because they were poor or they were minority. Right? They didn't care at all. And then suburban kids, suburban white kids specifically, started dying and everybody cared.
Right.
And now we're at this point where society is desensitized to it. You know what I mean? If you're out and about and somebody has an overdose in the bathroom at McDonald's, you're just like, sucks that it happened, but that's just the world we live in.
Right. You know? I know right now when we drive by Pioneer Park, supposedly that has become a place for people to go and I guess chill in their cars or do whatever they do.
And any place that has running water and a closed door is a place where a junkie will shoot dope.
Yeah.
That's just fact of life, man. I got high in Wendy's bathroom so much because they had a locking door, right? Yeah. That when I go in now, they still use the same cleaning agents that they used then. And I have that mental flashback when I smell it.
Takes,
So they say that smell has the biggest memory connection. Yeah. So, but yeah, it doesn't make me want to get high.
No, but it takes you back. It reminds me of the memories. Yeah.
And it's, typically it's like gratitude is what I get now when I smell that. But yeah, and I went pretty deep into that for a solid 9.5, almost 10 years.
Wow.
You know, homeless. You know, the first time that I got kicked out of my house was I was 14. You know what I mean? And I wasn't even using heavy drugs yet. You know, I had a little bit of experimentation with, you know, LSD and, you know, definitely alcohol pretty regularly and marijuana super regularly and nerve pills here and there. But I wasn't shooting cocaine and heroin at that point, you know, and I got kicked out even then. So I was used to it by the time that I became like a real junkie, you know. And when I was like 13 and 14, well, especially like 14 and 15, I would get thrown out of my house. And then, you know, the man who quote unquote led our home would call the police and say that I ran away. And that was a game that we played. And it was terrible. And I hated it. Yeah. Because it's either stand there and catch a beating, you know, or leave, like you told me. And then I got to deal with cops, you know, running me down. And it was constant stress, man. Right. And you know, I've gone to so much therapy. And it was weird because the first couple of years I was sober, I would argue that the first decade that I was sober, I felt like I owed it to them to forgive them. Yeah. You know, because that's kind of what I was taught, you know, in recovery. And the truth is I don't owe that to them. You know what I mean? I owe it to myself to not hold on to that constant resentment, but I don't have to let them into my life in any way. You know, I don't have to say that your behavior was okay because I did this or make it up an excuse. Because that's one of the things that I did because I didn't understand what forgiveness really was. You know what I mean? When I first got sober. I associated it with saying what you did was okay. You know what I mean? That's what I associated forgiveness with. And that's what I tried to do for like the first 10 years. And that's not what forgiveness really is. Forgiveness is just not holding on to that constant rage. But I'm not going to make that same mistake of letting those people in my life again. Right.
So let me ask, have they, since you've been sober, have they at any point in time taken any ownership or responsibility? Or
the woman that I called my mother growing up has. She apologized like a year ago maybe, but we're talking 15 years after I've been sober. You know what I mean? I've been sober since November 8th, 05. So I'm coming up on, if I don't drink, use, or die between now and November 8th, that's 16 years.
That's amazing. That's a fantastic accomplishment. And
I mean, I don't know that it's really an accomplishment, man.
It is. From where I've seen you before to where you are now, you have accomplished many things. To the point,
up a bunch of weight, I'll tell you that. That's what I've accomplished. A pretty significant beer belly without drinking a drop of beer. But I mean, I follow directions. You know what I mean? Like,
so did you do like a 12-step program or what?
I did.
Okay.
I did. I can't say which one because they're all anonymous. You know what I mean? And here's the thing where I'm at with it now, though. Like, so I still do the step work, right? But I don't know if it helps. I really don't. Right. I don't know if the step work helps at all. I don't. What I do know is that in the particular program that I'm in, I've never seen anyone come in and do all of that work the way that it says to in our literature, like the actual way that it says. Because you go to some of these 12-step meetings and people say wild stuff. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, well, I did this step and it was like this. And in my head, I'm like, that's not what that book says. Like that. So
were you following the directions? Because that's not how I saw it.
Yeah, that's not. And like all the words. So the thing that helped me out the most is I did a book study for guys that couldn't read. I guess I had almost a year clean and sober at that point, and we're going through this book. And so I would tell them if there's a word that you don't get or the context that you don't get, let me know and we'll look it up in the dictionary. Like I'm not going to give these guys my version of what I think it means or what it means to me. Because all these words had a definition before the guy that wrote the book used them. Right? That's why he picked those particular words. Yeah. And so we would look them up in a dictionary. And if there was a word in that definition that they didn't get, we would look that word up until they understood what it was trying to say. And it taught me more than it taught them. Right. You know, which I did it because I was told to do it. You know what I mean? I didn't go into it thinking I would get anything out of it. I went into it because that's what somebody told me to do. Right. And
so what gave you that feeling of I need to give up what I think is best and start listening to others?
Constant failure. Yeah. You know, at that point. So the first time I ever really tried to get sober was in 2004. First time I was court ordered in the treatment was like 96, late 96, early 97. It's hard to get the exact dates in the brain, but I was on juvenile probation. And I got caught drinking out at the airport with a bunch of friends, and so I got juvenile probation, and I failed a drug test for opiate narcotics. And they told me I had to go to some of these meetings, right? So that's the first time I was court-ordered to treatment. So, I meet people in recovery that feel like a failure because they didn't get it the first time. You know what I mean? The first time I was court-ordered, the first time I went to a meeting was like 1996, 1997, and my sobriety date is 2005. Wow. You know what I mean?
Right. So it didn't happen.
If you're
right
above
away.
ground and sucking air, dude, there's hope.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you're listening to this and you feel hopeless, if you're alive, like there's still hope. You know. But yeah, so all this time watching people come in and out, dude, I've seen tens of thousands of people come in and out of recovery in this time. And when I first got clean, I was kind of working in treatment. They were going to send me to school and all that stuff to be a counselor. And then there was an incident that occurred at the facility where I just knew it wasn't for me, right? They kicked some guys out because of a zero tolerance policy. Neither of those guys did what they did in a nefarious way. It just seemed super unfair to me. And I had to watch like a 50 and a 70-year-old man cry and beg to stay. Because they made them sit through a clinical. They made me sit through it too because I'm the one that sent them back to the facility from class. Cry and beg for their bed saying, I just don't want to hurt my family no more. And then still kick them out. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I was just like, I can't do this.
Right.
This is not for me. But just in that, that year, I probably saw 5,000 men come in and out of that facility, because they come stay for 4 days, come stay for a week, and leave.
Do enough to show, satisfy the court system.
Or the family,
or
the boss, or, sometimes they were just tired. You know what I mean? They wanted to come in and eat some expired vending machine sandwiches, and and get some energy for that next run. But the thing that's been true through all of it is that I've never seen anyone come in, do all the work, and continue to do the work the way that it says to in our book and fail.
Right.
Never, not once. But here's the truth of the matter. I don't know. I don't know that it's the actual work that fixes people or just that willingness to do anything it takes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Somebody who's beaten down that much to where they'll follow directions, and in the early days, a lot of those directions were just to keep me busy. Some of the stuff that those guys were telling me, stuff that's not in the book, but hey, go do this. Hey, go do that. Do the book study for guys that can't read. Go shake hands at the door at this meeting. Go make coffee for this meeting. Those sort of things to keep my crazy, just anxiety-ridden self, busy.
Did they provide you, do you feel, with a lot of structure?
Oh, that treatment facility I went to, it was a homeless shelter that offered a program of recovery. And there was a lot of zero tolerance stuff there. So like, I was already pretty good at institutional living at that point though. Like when I have that structure forced upon me, I can operate within the framework of it.
Right.
And that doesn't mean I operate within the framework of it sober all the time. I was getting drunk and high the whole time that I was locked up,
Yeah.
But the first time that I tried to get sober was in 2004. And I went to St. Elizabeth, it was St. Luke's at the time in Florence, to the psych ward and told him I was going to kill myself because I didn't want to live the way that I was living anymore. And the doctor came in and talked to me. He was like, look, people who start using drugs as young as you did and continue as long as you did don't get well. They die from alcoholism and drug addiction, period. He said, but we have this program to send people to the Falmouth Care Unit. The state will pay for it. Will you go? And I was like, I guess, man. Part of me instantly got resentment, though. Like, oh, I'm going to die? I'll show you.
Like a challenge.
Yeah. And, I stayed sober for almost 9 months. I completed their little program, and then I started doing a 12-step program afterwards. And I got to the point where I was supposed to be making amends, right? 9th step. And it was the first thing that I didn't have to bring back and show somebody and say, hey, this is what I did. This is what I wrote. You know what I mean? I'm just supposed to be out and doing them. I'm not recording them to take them back to prove that I did them. So.
Right. There's nobody to show your work to.
Right. And so you don't take medicine if you're not sick. right? And I already felt better than I had ever in my life, so I didn't do it. I started lying about it, you know?
Right.
And was not long until I was like, you know what? I could probably have a few drinks now. And I did. And then the very next day I woke up hungover and I was like, heroin will fix this hangover immediately. And,
wow.
You know, it was almost, I don't know, 6 to 8 months of like pretty hard ripping and running after that. And that's when I went to the healing place in Louisville, Kentucky. And, you know, it's a slightly different facility now than it was when I went there. But at the time, it was mainly a homeless shelter they just happened to offer a program of recovery. So, you know, I went down there and I was willing to listen and I was willing to. And so here's the thing, though. I had already had a taste of that. If I do what I'm told and do this work, I'll be happier. I'll be more able to deal with life, and I'll be more able to, you know, stay clean and sober, because I had that like almost 9 months, man, and it was probably some of the best times of my life up to that point.
Do you feel like when you got to Louisville, you were finally doing it for yourself versus like a challenge, or
I don't know that I was doing it for myself. I was just doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And my only other option was suicide at that point. And I had seen this special. I don't remember if it was 60 Minutes or Barbara Walters or what it was, but it was all people who had failed at suicide attempts. And they had made their lives just way worse. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that would
like I'm ugly enough, so I didn't want to be the guy that blew half his face off and lived through it. Now
right, and then have to explain that to everybody who sees.
Right.
Yeah.
And good luck getting somebody who you also find as attractive to be, you know, your significant other at that point. And you know, there was a guy who jumped in front of a train and ended up paralyzed from the neck down. Like those images, every time I would get really close to going through with offing myself, like that's what would come up.
Yeah.
You know, and
you never think you're not going to fail at that.
Yeah,
like
you
if that's something you're really, but and life has a way of kind of smacking you in the face and saying you're going to fail at what I want you to fail at.
Right.
So learn it instead of.
I mean, Van Gogh failed at it. You know what I mean? That's a dude who was a brilliant guy.
Yeah.
Fantastic artist. You know, even at his time, they saw him as one of the greats, and it was his suicide was a nightmare. You know what I mean? It was like a several day stretch of bleeding out from a stomach wound. You know?
Yeah, that's enough alone to turn you away from it.
Right. And I had a pretty good attempt in like 2001. I took enough between benzo nerve pills, old school tranquilizers, and opiate narcotics to kill someone 5 times my size.
Wow.
And this is like before Narcan was on every corner. You know? Dude, I woke up in the hospital. So I went out at the Frisch's on 5th and Philly in Covington. By the time I came to in the hospital, they had notified the woman I called my mother. Well, they found out who I was, found out who my next of kin was, notified her. She was in the hospital, jacket off, purse on the floor before I came to. And I had all the tubes and stuff, man, and I started going to rip those out. And dude, I was just so mad that I was alive. I wasn't supposed to be there.
Yeah.
You know, and then that suicide attempt violated my probation. That's why I went to prison. That violated my probation with suicide attempt. And in court, they didn't even want to hear anything. Dude, I spent 12 hours with this freaking psychologist when I was locked up to see whether or not I was criminally responsible for my actions.
Wow.
And they said no, that I was not, that I was under severe mental anguish and whatnot at the time.
So what was the choices there if they would have said that you
They could have reinstated my probation and sent me to either a treatment center or a mental health facility or lock me up. Or they could have just reinstated it with just do better, try harder, you know, which the guy right before me, man, was a pedophile who had failed to sign the predators list. And they just reinstated him. Make sure you sign that list.
Right.
Get on out of here. And so, like, that gave me hope, right? Like I hated that they let that guy back out, because that's a dude who's really dangerous.
Right.
You know?
Like, if you're going to let somebody who's that much of a danger to the public and people around him, then all right.
Right, yeah, I'm good to go.
Why do you care about me? I'm just a danger to myself.
The judge that I had was Judge Joseph Bamberger, who has since been disbarred and I believe charged criminally with a few things.
Wow.
There was a big lawsuit out in Boone County, and he had worked a deal with like some of the lawyers for some kickback money, and got busted.
Boy, you just have like a great way of meeting all the worst people in life, don't you?
Dude, you have no idea, man. You have no idea. I've met some of the wildest people, and some of it's been good though. Some of it's been insane. So when I started doing comedy, right? So like I've met a lot of wild, bad people in sobriety also, but I started doing comedy at like 6 years sober.
Yeah, because that's kind of when we picked up again. Was I noticed that you were doing the comedy around, like you come back kind of to the neighborhood and to the street with your daughter Julia, and my daughter hung out a little bit and everything. So we started coming back, and we went and saw you in one of your stand-ups, and I mean, you were a changed man from the last time I had seen you or really hung out with you.
Right. I mean, I was a different person. But even then, I was still, the trauma response was still super heavy. You know what I mean? I would still fly off the handle and snap on people, I used to have this real strong issue with when I saw someone being mean to a child in public, I got involved. And I don't just mean like I called the cops and reported it. I mean, I walked my butt over there.
And you would stick up for that kid.
In the middle of it, yeah.
That makes sense because...
Well, it doesn't, though, because you never, again, help or harm, right?
Right.
You never know.
No. I'm not saying that it makes sense that you do that. Right. It makes sense why you, Jay Armstrong,
behavior.
You want to save that kid because you never got saved when you were a kid, is what I'm thinking.
Right. No, and it seems like it would make sense, but that's what a PTSD trigger really looks like. Like, we have all these people with this self-diagnosed PTSD that, well, I'll be triggered. What does that mean? What do you do? What's your trigger behavior? What do you mean I get upset? That's not being triggered, man. That's not what it is. Like, it causes you to do some compulsive behavior. And for me, it was get violent with the guy that was, and how many of those situations did I make worse for that kid? Right. But here's what happened. When I was, 6, maybe 7 years old, the man that I called my father growing up is just lighting into me on the front steps of the church that we went to, right? And I had fallen asleep in church, is what it was. And up until that point, I thought that that's how every kid was raised. Thought it was normal. But this dude pulls into the parking lot and jumps out of his car and comes running over, and he's like, "You lay another hand on that kid and I will beat you to death right here on the steps of the house of the Lord."
Wow.
Dude, and it's the first vivid memory that I have. And I was like, man, that guy's upset. You know what I mean? Like, why is this guy so mad?
Why is this guy getting mad? I'm getting my ass beat.
And then, so you never know. Like, you could be making it worse for that kid. You could be making it worse for that kid in the short term, but now he knows or she knows, like, hey, this isn't right. This isn't normal. This is not okay.
Right.
It is not okay.
Right.
And you will accept way more unacceptable behavior when you think that it's okay. When
right.
you don't know that it's not okay. You have no other reference point.
Right.
You're not going to your friends' houses like, hey, does your dad punch you?
Right. It's not like you go and you talk about this stuff with friends. I mean,
right. And even then, people want to assume that everyone's experience is like theirs. So say they get a swat here and there. They get just regular spankings, and I don't believe in that either. I don't. No, I don't think it makes anything better.
Right.
I think it teaches your children to fear you, and I don't want my kids to be afraid of me.
Right.
I've never hit my kids.
Yeah, we've never been raised on that. I remember there was one time I got a spanking, and it was because we were at Arby's. I ordered a strawberry shake. They gave me a chocolate shake. I tried to explain to my father that I wanted a strawberry shake. He was frustrated. He didn't listen. And I said, no, really? And that was enough for him to drag me to the bathroom and just spank me in front of like 3 other guys that were also in there. And then he never did it again after my mom found out.
Right. But so everybody assumes that the human experience is similar. It's the same. So even if you do say something to somebody, they assume that you mean something that's not as insane as what's actually happening. But,
right.
So, yeah, I don't get involved anymore like that, and it's taken a lot of therapy to stop that.
Yeah.
And it is a compulsive behavior. I just can't do that. The only time that I ever really got worried is I went running up on this van from a guy that was shaking his daughter like against his van. And I told him he was done. Like, that's enough. And he turned out to be an off-duty police officer. And
no.
I was like, that could have went bad. But I still called 911, and I gave him the tag, and they were like, we will inform the agency that he works for. Because from the FOP tag, they could tell who it was and where they worked and all that right away, because they were inside of. But yeah, I mean, it took a lot of therapy to get beyond that. And
do you feel like your comedy is therapy?
Not really.
No.
I do talk about a lot of like painful stuff, but I don't know that it's therapy. I don't know. I know that I enjoy it.
Yeah.
So, is it a de-stressing? I mean, is de-stressing therapy? In that sense, it is. You know, does it help me like work through the emotional ins and outs of the different things that had happened? I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know.
Well, my thing is the de-stressing part of it is what I found to be kind of the secret for me was I figured out that my eating, my kind of issues were more about stress than anything else. And so once I was able to eliminate some of the stress and figure some things out and live a little bit differently, then things got a little bit easier. But now I find that, I don't want to say thrill seeking, but like achieving a goal is like one of the things that's driving this weight loss now is in October, we're going down to the gorge.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to climb Cloud Splitter.
Okay.
And the reason why we're doing that is because me and my nephew, we went camping there last year. And we're driving around, and I had never been there. He'd been to the gorge a few times. So he's showing me around and everything. And I point to this thing. I was like, he points to this thing, and he's like, that's Cloud Splitter. I was like, oh man, what's that? Let's go up there. And he was like, well, I mean, it's way up there. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. We can pull over. Can we park here? And he's like, well, I mean, there's like rocks and stuff. And I'm like, okay.
It's not a hike, it's a climb.
Yeah. And he's like, and there's like a big tree with a rope you got to like climb up. I'm like, finally I look at him. I'm like, are you telling me that I'm too fat for us to go up this thing? Because that's fine. I understand where I am. You can say that. And he was like, yeah, you're too fat for this thing. I'm like, all right, someday, buddy. So that was the thing, is now my thing, I can sit here and I can try to figure out why I'm so neurotic, why I, have whatever issues I have, or I can kind of set goals for myself that are in line with where I want to be in the future.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think understanding yourself, knowing yourself, why you do things, I do think that it is helpful. Do I think it's the most important thing? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like at the very beginning, I said, I don't know. And I don't. Right. And I'm okay with that now. And like I said, when somebody asks me something I don't know, we look it up. Like we'll find out together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not afraid to say that I don't know anymore. And I don't have to put on this air that like I know everything,
I've always wanted to start a religion just called I don't know. Like
who knows? Who cares?
Well, and that's the thing. Like, who created the world? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, but you can go help somebody or go like give some money to some people. Like, I know that. I don't know who created that cloud or the tree or any of that. Honestly, I don't really need to know that. Like, to make myself a good person.
Right. You just need a little healthy amount of apathy.
Right.
That's what I said to my buddy Pat's father-in-law the other day, and he was like, a good amount of apathy is super healthy. And this is a dude who's a professor of anthropology, but super cool, interesting experience with that guy. But yeah, so I mean, I don't know, all the inner workings and stuff, but I try to find out why I do things. I try to find out why I have the responses that I have, and I try not to hold on to this idea that I know how to fix it. I mean, it wasn't until almost 15 years sober that I finally said, you know what? I don't have to continue living with it. Was continued abuse is what it was. And passing on that to my daughter from the people that raised me. We're just done.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, just we're done. This is over.
Right.
I don't owe this to you. And I figured out why I thought that I owed it to him. And it's because of things that I was told early on in recovery, and because I didn't understand some of the things, the concepts that were being told to me. I don't owe it to anyone to keep them in my life. I just don't, and knowing why, I mean, So the simple things like, why do I get involved when the PTSD trigger of child abuse comes up? Like, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there's also other anxieties that come up, and it's like, well, why am I afraid of this? Why am I afraid of that?
Right.
You know, and finding out why a lot of times can be helpful.
But it's like those readings. If you go down the road and you're like, well, I don't know why I'm like this. Okay, well, why? Let me look for the definition. Then I find the definition in this. And then, you have to kind of get to I always call it the pee under the mattress before you can finally sleep well.
Right.
And I mean, it seems like you've had a pretty good run of being able to do that on a consistent basis.
Well, I mean, I definitely know myself now. Like I said, it's been tons of therapy, tons of recovery work. I have a way different attitude towards a lot of things like that than I did when I first got clean.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I've maintained, if you will, is once I decided that like, this is what I want. I do want to stay sober, and I can't tell you that it happened before I went to treatment. I can't tell you that I did, because I don't know when it really became like, this is it.
Right.
This is what I'm doing. And so, like, there's been things that I've avoided, and people keep telling me, like, like, throughout these different things, you're so strong, so like when my daughter's mother and I split up and she disappeared with her for 3 months and then moved a convicted sex criminal in with them, like, you didn't hurt yourself, you didn't drink, you didn't hurt anybody else, you're so strong. It's like, no, I'm afraid of what will happen if I do those things.
Right, like the situation could be made worse if I go down this path.
Right, I know alcohol will make it worse. I
Right.
know drugs will make it worse.
Right.
I know, one of the things one of the old timers told me when I first showed up to the rooms of recovery was, I can't think of a single problem that alcohol can't make worse.
That's true.
And add drugs to that as well.
Right.
But so I had my shoulder reconstructed. I had my right, I tore my rotator cuff completely. I tore my bicep, and I had some bone spurs.
I remember this.
I refused all narcotic pain meds, right?
Wow.
Like, even during the surgery, I didn't have any painkillers.
Didn't you have to go through a bunch of hoops just to not have the painkillers?
No, not really. The physical therapy was a nightmare without it. It hurt. It really did. And I have a pretty high threshold for pain. I've been walking around on a torn ACL for 12 years now. Wow. It's bad enough to where after I had the shoulder surgery, I was like, well, I might as well get this knee looked at now that I have insurance.
The Bionic J, here we come, right?
And so my knee doctor told me that I've done so much damage to it walking on it with the torn ligament that he could replace the ligament today and I would not notice.
Really?
Yeah.
So you've done so much that there's no going back.
So he said in 5 or 10 years we'll do a total knee replacement and that'll be that. I would have been ready for it right then. Yeah. Let's do it, man. Like, I'm already hurt. Let's do this.
You know what I think they should start doing? Putting, like, Bluetooth and stuff in these replacements.
So you can they're going bad?
No, so you can just, okay, now I can start my playlist. Just tap on my knee right here. All right.
But so, before the surgery, my surgeon told me that I could not refuse the morphine during the surgery.
Wow.
Right? And so I told him immediately, okay. Because I gotta get it done,
right.
But I wasn't really that okay with it,
right?
And I talked to other people in recovery and guys that were kind of like my advisors, if you will, and stuff, and I acquiesced to it. You know what I mean? Like, well, that's what it's got to be. It's what it's got to be. I can't lift my arm,
right?
Like, I got to be able to use my arm. Like, I literally, like, I could move it. Like, if I tried to raise my arm up forward or to the right, I can move it like a foot. And that was it. Wow. Total tear of the rotator cuff and part of the bicep. And so I get to the surgery center, day of surgery, and the surgeon comes in and he does some drawing and stuff on my arm and signs his little initials on everything and leaves. And then the anesthesiologist comes in and he goes, "It says here that you're allergic to opiate narcotics. Is that true?" And I said, "Well, allergic isn't really the right way to say it. I put that in there so I don't have to have this conversation. You know what I mean? I don't have to explain why I don't want the pain pills all the time."
Right.
And he goes, "Well, do you want to refuse all opiate narcotics?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "But the surgeon told me that during the surgery, like, I couldn't refuse the morphine because there was a risk of me waking up." He goes, "Look, that's the doctor that does the cutting. I'm the doctor that does the medicine. Do you want to refuse it?" And immediately it was huge victory in my heart. Like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
But then he walked out, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't be in the middle of like this pissing contest between these two men who have my life in their hands.
Right,
you know?
right.
But I didn't back out of my refusal.
So were you awake? Or
no,
anything?
I tried to be. They told me I couldn't.
Yeah.
They told me because of the positioning they would continue to move me into, and I would have to stay absolutely still for it, that they couldn't.
Yeah,
okay. Absolutely.
So they were able to knock you out, but just not give you
just
any
a sodium pentothal instead of any opiate narcotics. Right. Which, I mean, sodium pentothal is a narcotic, but it's not opiate.
So when you woke up, like, how did that feel?
I immediately became what the nursing staff described as combative. Also, a couple of things. So I woke up way faster than they were used to.
Right.
I didn't take the morphine.
Yeah.
And I asked them, I was like, when can I leave? It's the first words out of my mouth. And she was like, oh, honey, you don't need to worry about leaving. And I hadn't eaten in like 18 hours. I was like, I need a cheeseburger, and I need nicotine, and I need them now. And she goes, oh, honey, you don't need those things. And I was like, yes, I do. And so she kind of walks away, and she comes back, and I was like, she's like, how you feeling? And I was like, I feel like I need a cheeseburger, and I need nicotine. And she says, well, everything was a success. Just want you to know that if that makes you feel any better, but we did have to do 2 extra procedures. And I was like, well, what were they? And she's like, well, your wife's going to come in a minute. She's going to be the one to explain that. And I was like, but you're here now. You know what I mean? Don't tell me you did extra stuff to me and then not tell me what it is. Like, I'm upset, but I'm real groggy. And so she's like, that's not how it works. The doctor explains it to your significant other, and then they come in and tell you when you're a little more awake.
You're like, thanks for the telephone game here.
I was like, she didn't even know that windmills didn't create wind, man. You're a nurse. Like, you're a professional. Like, you went to school for this. How about you tell me? Right? So then Amber comes in, and I'm already, like, agitated with this nurse. And she's like, what's wrong? And I told her, and the nurse is like, I told him he doesn't need a cigarette. I was like, I am not a smoker. And she said, well, dip, chew, whatever it is. I was like, no, like I'm a vapor. And she goes, well, that's just as bad. And dude, I've said it so many times that it just came out like a tape recording. Like when we were talking about at the beginning, that you say it over and over again.
Right.
Dude, without missing a beat. According to the British Royal Ministry of Health, dude, like I could barely say my name a minute ago.
Yeah.
Now, according to the British Royal Ministry of Health, vaping e-liquid is at least 95% less harmful than smoking cigarettes. They first made that conclusion in 2015 and have doubled down on it every single year. Like, dude, so
you're in immense pain and you're giving her all this.
I'm giving her the business, right? And so, like, I'm looking at her.
Why would they ever list you as combative?
What's funny though is like a few minutes before that, like I'm slurring my words because I'm still coming to, but now I'm like crystal clear, and like Amber and the nurse are both looking at me like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
And she left. The nurse walked out, and Amber told me so they had to so when they did the MRI, they didn't look at the bicep at all. But when he got in there, he saw that the bicep was torn, and so they fixed that. And then I had some bone spurs, and they got those out of there as well. Oh, they just shave them down. Oh. They like grind them off.
Oh. That's making me hurt right now. Ugh.
But that was the extra things, and so then I started physical therapy like 5 days later or 3 days later, whatever it was, and I had a nerve block. Right, so the nerve block was weird. I couldn't move my arm at all. I couldn't move my hand or my fingers. I just felt like everything was super swollen all the time.
So this nerve block, was it doing anything for the pain?
Oh yeah, I couldn't feel anything.
Okay. So you couldn't
for like 3 days.
Wow.
And then when that wore off, I felt it pretty good.
Yeah.
But then I had an issue where the scar tissue formed before the muscle healed. So I had to go back in and do this procedure called a forced manipulation, where they knock you out, but they just yank your arm straight up to try to break free all that scar tissue, man.
Ugh.
And I had a moment that was kind of unnerving setting that up, because I'm with like the scheduling person ready to leave after the appointment where the doctor told me it was necessary. And she's like, you refused pain meds last time. Do you want to refuse pain meds this time? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And she goes, are you sure? And I go, yeah. And she's like, you know what this procedure is, right? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, so you're sure you want to refuse the pain meds this time? And I was like, should I not be? She's like, well, this is going to be way worse than the surgery.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Thanks for telling me that.
And it wasn't even necessarily the procedure itself. It was that starting immediately the next day, it was 5 days in a row of physical therapy.
So it wasn't okay, so you had to keep working on it, and that's why they wanted to give it to you, so you didn't have to.
Well, I mean, plus it hurt.
Yeah.
Like it did hurt. Like I woke up and the doctor so like even in the office, like the day that I went in for the consultation about it, like he couldn't lift my arm up.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, he could
without it hurting?
He couldn't. It stopped at a certain point because the scar tissue had formed so strongly.
Wow.
So, he's describing it to me. He's like, you'll be knocked out. You'll be laying down on the thing. I'm going to take your arm. And he kind of shows me like he's holding it against his chest. He goes, and I'll push it forward and break it free with my body weight. And I was like, this sounds brutal.
Yeah.
And it is a brutal procedure, but yeah, still refuse the payment. So people would say, you're so brave and strong. And no, it's all fear driven.
Yeah.
And I know what will happen.
But come on, realistically, that's what brave and strong is. People who are afraid but do it anyways.
Well, I mean, here's the thing though. I did the surgery wasn't the scary part.
Right.
It's the consequences of putting opiate narcotics in my body.
Right.
So yeah, I didn't do the thing I was afraid of.
Right.
You know what I mean? I did the painful thing instead, but here's the thing. I guess I had like 14 years sober at that point. Could I have taken pain meds? Probably. You know what I mean? Probably could have. It's been a long time. Do I think I could follow directions? I think I've shown that I'm pretty good at following directions.
Yeah.
But there's that little chance.
Right.
You know what I mean? That it would not have gone well.
Right.
Or, the idea gets planted like, hey, man, you followed directions. Like, you did it right, just the way that the doctor said.
Right.
You could probably smoke a little weed here and there. You
it
know
might
what I mean?
be okay the first month, and then 3 months down the road, be like, well, I did do okay with that. So, and then you're on that slippery slope of going back down in a spiral.
And it's insanity is what it is.
Yeah.
Like, based on, like, Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results is an insane thing to do. And,
stop calling me insane, Jay.
Right? Just beat your head against the wall wondering why things aren't changing when you're not changing.
Right.
Your decisions aren't changing. You're doing the same exact thing over and over again, thinking that magically one day it's going to work.
It's just going to, yeah.
And so it's not worth. I'd rather just suffer the pain that I know is coming rather than the absolute nightmare that could come.
That could, yeah. So, do you feel like you have any addictions now?
Definitely a nicotine addict.
Nicotine.
I vape instead of smoke now.
Yeah.
I'm definitely addicted to spending too much money on vapor products. Like the thing that I've got with me today, that's a $500 setup right there, man.
$500? That thing looks like a suitcase with...
Well, you're looking at $300 for the device itself, $10 for the battery, $100 for the bridge, and then $50 for the doors.
So when you inhale, do you get like somebody to come in and personally massage your lung on the inside for $500?
I should at least get like a Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition or something.
Right?
But no, it's just, I don't know, man. I like that thing. I was heavy into like the mechanical mods, like the big cloud blow and stuff, and that's not really what this is. And so, I sold some things, some stuff that I had collected, some vapor stuff that I collected, and got this, and I'm going farther and farther down that rabbit hole on that billet box, and so
you're kind of going down the rabbit hole with the vaping because
I've been vaping for 6 years. And here's the thing about that, dude. So and that's a topic as far as why people hate us, why people hate the vapor industry, and what propaganda led to it and the motivations behind it. Dude, I could talk about that for 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah. I don't want to go into that.
It all boils down to money that states are losing, both in cigarette taxes and from the 1998 Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement from that big lawsuit. So they put out all this misinformation. They put out all these quote-unquote studies. They don't prove anything. All those studies say may. It may.
Right.
But I've been vaping for 6 years, and beginning of last year, I had this cough that just would not go away, right? Like 6 weeks, dude. And it was uncontrollable. I didn't sleep at all through the night. I believe at this point it was COVID. But at the time, we had no idea.
Right.
You know, I mean, we didn't even think it was in America yet. So it was like the end of February, beginning of March of last year. And so I go to the hospital and they do a chest x-ray and all this other stuff. And the one x-ray tech comes in and she's like, "You're not a smoker, huh?" And I was like, "No, ma'am." She's like, "Did you ever smoke? Your lungs look great." And I was like, "No, I never. No, I smoked for 24 years." And she's like, "Oh my God, you quit?" And I was like, "Yeah." And, you know, when people ask me, like medical people ask me how I quit, I just say, "I don't know, just quit."
Yeah.
Because when you say that you vape, then they freak out on it.
Then they say it's the same.
Even though they just told you, "Hey, your lungs look perfect." Like
we have the picture evidence right here,
like
but I'm going to flip on you.
They've healed up from the damage that you did to them.
Wow.
But then freak out.
So let me ask you this, because my big thing, I feel like addiction is something you will never be able to get away from. Like, you have to figure out how to deal with addiction. And addiction and sobriety are not the same thing. Because for me, like, one of my current addictions right now is the Tetris game on my phone. Right. I will find myself playing the game and feeling so good at beating it and doing all of that stuff, and just one after another until I look up and I'm like, "Oh my God, it's been a half an hour. I need to eat or something."
But, I mean, as long as it's not causing negative consequences in your life, like, don't.
Well, and that's the thing. But sobriety deals only with drugs. It's not like I'm like, "All right, I've been 4 years sober from Tetris. I'm good." Like, you know, you're not gonna...
people have like clean dates from like donuts, man.
Really?
From gambling. Gambling's a big addiction thing. I don't gamble either because of the same worries.
But when I think of sober or sobriety, I think of drugs, alcohol, maybe even nicotine, stuff like that. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is, you can say that, but you can be addicted to anything. Like,
I mean, if you have compulsive behavior and you manage to break that hold on you, whether it's with or without help, I mean, I think you should celebrate that. You know, I mean, there's people that, like I said earlier, there's people who compulsively eat toilet paper right off the roll. And I saw that on My Strange Addiction, and I thought it was totally made up. And then I saw a woman sitting in a minivan outside a comedy club, just going to town, picking off little pieces of this toilet paper, eating it. Yeah, I mean, it's clean toilet paper right off the roll, so... You don't have to think it's as gross as you might be.
No, I mean, I guess here's the thing. When I was a kid, I used to eat movie tickets. When I would be in a movie, I would sit there and I would compulsively just chew on the movie ticket, and then by the end, it would be gone. I'd eat the whole ticket by the end of the movie, because. I
mean, whatever it is in your life, if it's causing negative consequences, and you manage to break that stranglehold that it has on you, whether it's with therapy, whether it's going to treatment, and like. Eating disorders, man, self-harm, man, there's so many terrible things that people can do to themselves compulsively without it being drugs or alcohol that are, you know, it's just as important to celebrate those wins. And when I don't really celebrate, I don't have like a party, you know, every year on my anniversary date, but I definitely let it be known to the world, and it's partly to celebrate it for myself, but partly for somebody that knew me especially, man, because a lot of my friends, so here's what's weird, so... When I first got sober, I ran into a lot of people that called me a junkie scumbag for years, who are now heroin addicts.
Really?
In need of help, right? And the first guy was a guy who actually bullied me relentlessly in high school. And then, you know, I'm a freak and all the other, you know, homophobic slurs that they would call us back then and all that. And because being a punk rock kid in Independence, Kentucky was not a particularly easy thing to be, you know. But so then even after high school, when I was still drinking, I run into this guy at a bar, and he comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, you remember me, man?" And I guess he just remembered my face, but didn't remember like how brutal him and his friends were to me.
Right.
And I was like, "Yeah, dude. Yeah, I remember you. You made my life a living hell." And he's like with this chick that he's been talking to. And so he ends up being kind of a jerk after that. And then... I was about a year sober. I just moved home, and I hear, "Hey, this particular guy is bad off." And initially, I'm like, "Good,
right?
I hate that guy." You know,
like it serves him right.
I ran into him at an Ameristop, and he was bad off. And I walked up to him, and I was like, "Hey, man, do you remember me?"
Yeah.
And he kind of knew who I was, but he kind of didn't. And I was like, hey, man, from what I understand and the way you look, you've been going through some rough times. And you don't have to keep doing that. You don't. And if you want to go to treatment, like, it was a longer conversation than that.
Right.
That's what it came to, at the end. Like, I will take you, dude.
Wow.
Because I didn't want him living like that.
Right.
I didn't wish it.
Even though he made your life a living hell, you still didn't want him.
Right. The pain and suffering of a drug addict and an alcoholic, man, it's intense. It is. And, people think that it's this, they have this idea that it's like partying all the time. And most of the time it starts out as that. But eventually it becomes maintenance. And it is not.
Like the good times catch up with you. And
the good times are over. Now you're just trying to stay to a point where you don't kill yourself on purpose. You know, and I saw him in that state, and I didn't feel good. You know what I mean? I wasn't happy anymore. And I think that's part of the humanity that we've lost, being a society that basically lives on social media. You know what I mean? When I heard about this guy, good.
Right.
You know what I mean? But then I saw him really suffering.
Right.
I can't abide by it. You know what I mean? I have to offer.
Right.
And he refused. You know what I mean? And I went about my business, and I've never seen or heard anything about this guy since then. But it is what it is. I hope he got sober.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or I hope that if he did go out, that he didn't take anybody else out with him, and he didn't cause any extra harm. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and honestly, I mean, and even in that situation, because I find this too with myself, the older that I get, the more I don't want to think back on a situation and think, oh man, I should have done this. Right. Like if I think I should do something, I'm going to go ahead and do it. And if it works out to be the best thing, then hopefully that's great for everybody.
Yeah, hopefully you're right more than you're not.
Right. I mean, there's no way of really knowing.
That takes us back to life must be lived forward, but understood in reverse.
Right. Right. Well, I'll tell you what, Jay. I think we've had a pretty great conversation here. I don't know if you helped any of these audience people. I don't know about that, but you've definitely helped me. And that's what's most important. So.
I think that's great, man. I think that's great. I think that after the conversation that we had, especially the way it began in the beginning, that's the perfect joke to kind of wrap things up with. And, if you want to do this again, we didn't even talk about comedy, really. You know what I mean? Like, we touched on it. But when you start digging into stuff, with I mean, you're going to have guests that especially people that know themselves or know their trade, like really know it. Yeah. The conversations are going to get way out of control because you tend to relate things in your life to that trade even. Yeah. It seems boring. Like if you get a tile guy in here, like you can bet that the way that he does his work influences the way he lives his life, and the way that he lives his life, influences the way that he works. And everything's connected, man.
Right.
You know what I mean? Everything's connected.
Well, I believe everything has a life. Like I've always thought that it's interesting to think of, you might use a paper clip. Like it first had to be forged out of some sort of metal.
Iron ore at one point, yeah.
Right. And then shipped and delivered. So, I mean, you may see it as something that's just sitting on your desk that eventually you'll use someday.
Todd Snyder's got a song about starting off as a tree and ending up as a newspaper.
Nice.
And I forget what the song is called, but
I'll have to look that up.
Todd's a guy that he knows himself. You know what I mean? And his songs are very, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word I'm looking for. They're insightful.
Yeah.
Because he knows himself. You know what I mean? He pays attention to the world around him. And I think that's the biggest thing, dude. Pay attention to what happens.
I'll tell you what. You remember my neighbor Nadine, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Amazing lady. Yeah, you live in her house now. Amazing lady. She was in the Navy in World War II.
Right.
Up at Wright-Patterson. She helped with building, she actually created a building thing. Anyways. I was going through a whole bunch of her stuff because, she's passed. So now we kind of have her pictures and her paperwork and all of that. And so I was going through some of that stuff and I found this picture because her mom was a teacher.
Right.
And it's this classroom. Now, this was back in the 40s and 50s. So this was during the Cold War.
Right.
And the image has a chalkboard in the background. And on the chalkboard, it says, if we have beaten this war of nuclear arms, it is because we finally know thyself.
Right.
That knowing thyself is more important and the only thing that could actually beat the nuclear war that was going on, the Cold War that they were afraid of at that time. And I don't know, to me that just speaks volumes, because so many mean, evil, bad things are done out of ignorance.
Right.
That if you just, listen to the Maintain podcast and start, if you do anything that really educate yourself, you're going to better your life.
Right. No harm rarely comes from insight and education.
Right. What do you want your legacy to be?
I don't know that I want one. I think the least amount of harm you can do to the world is leaving without having changed it much.
I don't believe
the whole Boy Scouts thing.
Yeah, but here's the thing. You have kids.
Yeah, and I feel like I've broken that cycle of trauma.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
But that's the thing. That's what I love about legacy, is that it can be as simple as breaking that cycle of trauma for the next generation.
No longer bringing more harm into the world. And I think that fits exactly with what my initial answer was that you didn't like.
Which, wait.
That I don't want to leave a legacy. I don't want to have changed the world.
Well, you may not want to.
So I stopped bringing more harm to kids.
Right. But, that's the thing about a legacy, is you have no choice in it.
Yeah, well, I would say that the actions that you take every single day have some choice in what your legacy is.
Oh, yeah. But your legacy isn't decided by you. It's decided by those who come after you.
Right, but my daughter will not know or understand the harm that she could have faced. You know what I mean? Because hurt people hurt people. Typically, child abuse is something that's passed down from generation to generation.
Right.
So cause no harm. That's what I want my legacy to be. He caused less harm than he could have.
Right. Well, and that's great. And I'm not trying to discredit any answers or anything. You were saying that you want no legacy, but
right.
My thing about legacy that kind of hit me in my 30s was that no matter what, you're going to leave a legacy. You can either choose to do better actions to leave a better legacy, or people will look at you and say what they want after you're dead.
Yeah, people are going to look at you and say what they want anyway.
Right. But hopefully...
You can be the best guy in the world. You're an enemy. You're a villain in someone's story.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yeah, everybody's hero is somebody else's villain.
But at least I know the villain in me.
Right.
You know what I mean? I know the harm that I've caused. So, for the people that are out there that take issue with me or the things that I say or the things that I've done in my past, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
I get it. I suck. But I'm trying not to be harmful in the way that I have been.
Right.
And I feel like I've made mistakes. I've caused harm in sobriety. You know what I mean? And some of it, I don't want to make it sound like any of it was on purpose. You know what I mean? But some of it, I really didn't see the unintended consequences of my actions, what they would have on somebody else.
Right.
And how far reaching some of that stuff can be, and I try to be more mindful of that.
Right.
Now. And it took some painful experiences for myself, understanding that I caused harm. You know what I mean? Once you make that decision where you don't want to be creating havoc in the world, when you create it, it's. I don't want to make it sound this simple, but it's like losing at a game that you've gotten good at.
Right.
That was stupid. Why'd you do that?
Right.
Gotta be better. You know what I mean?
Well, it kind of opens your eyes to see how much chaos and harm you've caused before.
Oh yeah, I got a list of it.
Right.
I wrote it down. You know what I mean?
Right.
And except in cases when it will cause more harm to bring it up to a person or even see that person.
Right.
Sometimes the best thing you can do is just never see that person again. And that's not a cop-out. You know what I mean? You owe somebody money, you go give them that money. Dude, I went to a store that I had shoplifted from that never caught me. Told them, this is what I assume based on my calculations that I have taken from your store without paying.
Yeah.
I gave them my name, my social security number, and all that stuff. And they're a very large corporate store. And they sent me to talk to their loss prevention people because the people in the manager's desk didn't know what to do about it.
Yeah. Okay.
As I'm saying this to these people, and I wrote it down, I wrote a letter that I read to them so that I didn't try to minimalize or justify my actions or any of that. And the lady's like, I'll call corporate, but I don't know what to do. Like, how do we even accept money from you? Like, I don't have like an account that I can put it in. And
but none of that stuff even mattered because it was just, I'm sure it felt better to you to go there and tell them, look, this is the wrong that I've caused you. If you want, I will make up for it.
No, there was no, if you want, it was, I have this money with
me. You actually had the money?
Yeah, well, I had a down payment on it. And I was trying to set up a payment plan with them. And, man, they just didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
You know, like,
did they eventually take the money?
They told me that they would have someone from corporate contact me, and they never did.
Wow.
But the important thing is that I made the effort. You know what I mean? I was willing to do it. So, like, I understand the harm that I've caused. I understand that, and so some of it's farther reaching than you think. So people that shoplift, they make all the prices go up for everybody else.
Right.
You know, and for your middle class people, most of the people listening to this podcast probably is not going to make a difference. But sometimes that extra $10 a week on groceries makes a difference to a family that's of low income.
Yeah, they can be a dinner.
So that's real harm that I cause. I cause real. You don't see it as really hurting real people when you're stealing from a corporation. You see it as stealing from these corporate jerks. You know what I mean? That have more money than they know what to do with, but they pass that cost on to the poorest people.
Right.
You know, so I call it. I know the extent. Well, let me rephrase that. I have a much better comprehension of the extent of damage that I've done than I did.
Right.
You know, none of us will ever truly know the amount of harm that we've caused in the exact same way that none of us will ever know the amount of good that we've caused.
Well, I try to follow philosophy, I guess is what you call it, but leave things better than you found them.
Yeah, it's Boy Scouts, man. That's what I was saying. Right?
Oh, yeah.
The Boy Scouts.
Do no harm, but...
Well, no, do no harm is the Hippocratic Oath. That's the doctor thing.
Oh, okay.
Leave things better than you found them is the Boy Scouts motto.
Oh, okay. All right, Jay. Well, I appreciate you being on.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Maintain. Here's a clip from our next episode, Maintaining Beauty, with local actress Misty Jump.
I'll tell a story from when I worked at my full-time job. Okay. So I was at the drive-thru, and there was this man, and he came up in a truck every single day, and he was like gruff, just mean. Well, every single day when he would come up to the drive-thru, I would always greet him with, "Hey, good morning. How's your day going?" And it took me about a year, and one day he said back, "It's great. Thank you so much." And then ever since then, he would come through and he would smile.
Please be sure to review and follow this podcast so you can be notified of the next episode. Maintain is brought to you by Christopher Keeney Productions. If you like what you hear, contact us and maybe we can do a podcast for you. Thank you and good luck maintaining.
Making that human connection, right? And that's what your podcast is kind of about, making a connection with somebody who's done something, for a consistent period. And so you want your audience to maintain, in 5 years, you want to have a random audience member on, like, how have you maintained listening to my podcast for these past 5 years? And they'll be like, well, it's amazing content. Your second guest just blew the doors off the place. And that's really why I'm here today, because you had Jay Armstrong on the second episode.
See?